Some viewers may find the following video disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
So last week a tragedy happened during the stopping of Daunte Wright. The officer who, was performing the, at best case scenario, negligent act. She resigned. She quit the police force. She's also being charged now. But I think everyone has pretty much seen the video that took place. That the officer claims she believed that she drew her taser. It was on the body cam footage. She said, taser, taser. Standard practice for when a cop deploys a taser to say that. And she was arguing and maintains the argument. She thought she had her taser. She thought she drew her taser. And she thought that that's what she was using. Okay. But instead, she drew her firearm and she wound up shooting Daunte Wright. Now, do I believe her story? Okay, that seems to be what the big debate is right now. Do we believe her? Well, first of all, if this were a complete rookie on the police force, even then, it's still, how do you really mistake that? Okay. But at the same time, at least if it was a rookie and they're not really used to being involved in the heat of the moment type stuff, they're still new, perhaps that mistake would be easier to make. The adrenaline rush, you grab the wrong weapon. Well, first of all, and also, how well has your training sank in? So, your firearm is typically to stay on your dominant side. The taser is standard to be on your weaker side. So if you're a right-handed person, your gun, your firearm would be on your right side. The taser would be on the left side. Okay? That being said, this lady had not been a newbie on the police force. She'd been with the police. I forget the exact number of years, but she'd been there for quite some time. So you not being exactly, green in the police force, that's a pretty big mistake to make for someone who's an experienced officer. Now, what is the depth of her experience during her time there? That I can't really speak to. I don't know, what rank or anything like that. Yeah, I don't really know what she's done throughout time. She could have even been kind of like a desk cop for all I know. But the point is, she's on the street. She'd been working for the department for all that time, and you're mistaking a gun for a taser. Now, first of all, it's not even like he just drew it straight out. So that even adds even more to, was this truly a mistake? How long did she hold that weapon in her hand before firing? And at some point, most tasers are kind of marked as with yellow on them. They're distinguishable, even in appearance, from a handgun. Okay? So, I don't know what color that department uses for their tasers, but if it was yellow, I mean, you mean to tell me that no one present realized she drew the gun and said something? Not to mention, again, it was in her hand for a little bit of time, they say, right? Like, she held on to this thing for so long. So, she held it for a good bit of time, and she didn't realize that she was holding a gun, and no one else around her realized that she wasn't holding a gun. Is it possible? I mean, I'm not going to say it's not, but the odds of that being the case, I would think, are pretty low. Pretty low. But that being said, I think most people kind of have that takeover. I'm like, how did you really not realize? So arguing this even from the devil's advocate standpoint and giving her the benefit of the doubt and saying that, okay, she didn't know. Well, first of all, I don't even think this argument I'm about to make really applies to her because she's a multi-year veteran of the force. So what kind of training could really be provided for someone who's already been there this many years? But this is why I would argue when they talk about defunding the police, it's not an issue of just gutting the police force dry. You need law enforcement. Okay, that's my opinion. Some people might disagree. I know some of my libertarian friends out there are, against the police in a lot of ways. Okay, I'm not. I recognize that a lot of the dangers that they're speaking of, and I'm going to speak out about those. I want a substantial reform in a lot of ways, okay? And some of that reform needs to be not necessarily slashing budget, and maybe you don't even have to increase a budget, but take the budget that's there now and do something better with it than you're doing right now. You know, they're using a lot of these police budgets in the same way our tax dollars are being used to fund things like war and things that don't really invest back into we as a country. A lot of that's going on with police dollars too. What they're taking in tax money, tax revenue from their local communities, and they're investing and buying more military style gear and not investing in better training of cops to know what they're doing, better training in how to interact with public. And here's one I've been preaching on for about a year: better ways of interacting with the community around them and understanding the personality and the culture of the community you're policing. Some people may be local to the area and be a cop, and I guarantee you that cop, unless he just got a superiority complex and a half-flaccid penis, and he's got some bad fucking problem that he's got to wave his badge and gun around, if he grew up in that community and he knows the people around him, okay, then he's probably going to be able to diffuse situations with people in that community easier without needing weapons, without needing to fire a gun, without needing to just constantly wave his, badge and gun around and have a pissing contest. A cop that knows the community knows how to interact with people in the community. So especially for people who come from outside the neighborhood, from outside communities that know that area and know how to interact with people better, they are going to especially need that kind of training. And even some of the people who grew up there. Like maybe you just grew up on the other side of the tracks, as they say, right? And you're going to be policing an area of town you didn't go to that often. And believe it or not, that can make a difference in some communities. One half of town is kind of one way, one half of town's the other way. If you grew up on the rich side of town and you're going to be policing the kind of run down side of town, then you better get to learning people in that area and understanding how to interact with those people so that you could possibly diffuse situations without needing violence or death or whatever. I mean, it's always possible, but why not try to explore more avenues to stop those things from happening? So that's where money really should be getting spent. But of course, that's not the case. Now, that being said, once again, we've got the town burning down because of what happened here. I'm just going to be honest, okay? I've made my criticism. I think that what happened with the taser mistaken, or the gun being mistaken for a taser situation, at the very best for that officer, complete and utter negligence on her part. Mistakes can happen, but that ain't no little mistake, okay? So at best for her, terrible negligence. At worst, she was just trying to BS and wanted to shoot the guy. I mean, it's going to be hard to know for sure what was going through her head, but neither situation is good. Neither way you look at that is good at all, and it should not be what we have serving on the force. And if you can't have good control of your mental state and your nerves, and you probably shouldn't be serving as a cop or in the military, because you kind of need that good focus to be able to respond to these situations without letting your nervous emotions control you. Because when that happens, you are going to be more likely to make these mistakes. But again, that being said, now we get around to what took place with Daunte Wright in general. Now, everyone is burning the town down over this. I'm going to be honest with you. To me, even though, of course, the lieutenant is still alive and well today, I think that situation was a whole lot worse than the one we've got right here. Now, some people are probably going to hear that and be like, how can you say that? This man's dead. That guy's not. Simply because whether this was intended murder or complete negligence on the part of this cop, Daunte Wright started resisting arrest. Flat out. Okay? He had a rap sheet. The other guy was a lieutenant. If you're a criminal and you're out there committing crimes and you get stopped, odds are a cop's probably going to take you to jail. That's just a given. That's what happens when you live in a country where there's laws. And if you break those laws and you get pulled over for whatever reason, and the cop realizes you are who you are and you're wanted for this or that, they're going to arrest you. That's a given. That should not be this unheard of outrage, okay? The outrage, if anything, should just be in what took place here. But once again, would this have happened if Daunte Wright had just accepted, okay, I got caught, and let the cuffs go on and go to jail? Would the cops have shot him anyway? Like, are we to believe, is it possible? Sure, but problem is, that ain't what happened here. He started resisting arrest. When you start resisting arrest, if a cop's going to arrest you, once you start resisting, you are inviting a lot more problems to potentially happen to yourself at that point. Right or wrong on the cop's part. But the cops are not taught in law enforcement, if they don't want to go to jail, don't take them to jail. Their job is to uphold the law. Now, as we saw with the second lieutenant, okay, some people will take that too far, like that Gutierrez guy with Lieutenant Nazario, okay? With what happened there, you've got a cop who just clearly wants to wave his badge and gun around and exert his power over someone else. Nazario, the worst thing he did was not get out of the car, but he cited valid reasons for why he wasn't exiting the vehicle. Number one, at the many times, the cop was not clearly explaining the reason why he pulled him over and immediately was drawing weapons on him. He also explained to the cop, you got your gun drawn on me right now. I'm afraid to reach for this seatbelt because you could then say I'm going for a gun. And of course, you didn't say all this, but this was the implication. I'm afraid to reach because if I reach, you say I'm going for a weapon and pow pow, I'm dead. Okay? So that's a lot worse. He had no reason to stop Nazario in the first place. The reason he cited was because there was a lack of a tag. There was a tag. Okay? He was running from the cops, but he's running from the cops with flashers on, doing the speed limit to get to a well-lit area. Nothing was out of the ordinary there. Okay? But when Daunte Wright gets pulled over, they run the plate. They figure out, okay, this guy's got warrants out right now. One of them is for running from the cops. Now, I think it was Daunte Wright's aunt say about how one of them was for a pot violation, like marijuana or something, right? And as she properly pointed out, how many politicians probably smoke pot and they don't go to jail? How many rich people that live in the suburbs smoke pot and don't go to jail? So this is just one more reason why we need to end this war on drugs. Because the people who are paying the biggest price for it are the poor people, or in particular, black and brown people. People of color are getting hit with these pot violations and they're suffering for it at a higher price than a lot of other people are. Okay? And even if you're a poor white guy, you're probably more likely to get a slap on the wrist for having a little bit of weed than the black or brown person that gets caught. You know, so that's a huge problem, and that's why that needs to be done and over with yesterday. Okay? If that had have already happened, then the pot thing wouldn't have even been an issue. But one of the other things was trying to run from the cops. Well, what does he try to do here again? He tries to run from the cops. At that very minute, regardless of what that officer's intentions truly were, you opened the door for a bad, bad outcome. Nothing good is going to come of that. You know, and this isn't just the white guy with the cowboy hat telling people, don't keep trying to buck these cops if you value your life. You want to know who else has told you not to do that? The leader of the new Black Panthers, Quan LX. Go look it on YouTube. If they haven't taken the video down thanks to YouTube censorship, Quan LX said years ago with some of these things that were going on between the black people and cops, okay? He said, look, please don't buck these officers. They invited Quan LX to come out and go through like police training on when to draw his gun, when to shoot. Turns out, Quan LX learned firsthand how easy you can have an innocent kill. You think they're doing one thing, they weren't listening to your instructions, you wind up shooting. Turns out they had like a candy bar in their pocket or something. Okay? There was all these things going on where they kind of showed him this is how things can go south at this quick. So he basically said by the end of it, like, yeah, we need more police reform. But I'm making the plea to all my brothers and sisters out there, just don't try to fight back with the cop. If they're telling you under arrest, just go along with it. Just let it be, because you'll live to see another day, odds are. But if you don't go along with it, you're heavily increasing the odds something's going to happen to you. Whether you live or not after that to be determined, but something bad's going to happen. So I'm not the only one saying this. Leaders of the new Black Panther, Quanell X, he said the same thing at this point, okay? So that needs to be taken into consideration here as well. I don't think we should over the top glorify someone who is doing something stupid. I don't want to glorify the cop that does stupid shit, and I also don't want to glorify the guy who does stupid shit either. It is common sense from the time I've been brought into this world that the worst thing you could do in the event that a cop is going to arrest you is try and resist arrest and fight back, because you're going to go to jail, or you're going to die, or you're at least going to get shot, tased, maced, whatever. And not to mention, if you do survive, to add to the suffering you're going to endure in the meantime that didn't kill you, you're then going to get extra charges added on that go before a judge. So instead of being charged and taken to jail and facing a judge for whatever you had, now you've got potential assault on an officer, resisting arrest. Let's just throw that on there. And then guess what that means? Even longer time in jail for you at that point, especially with it being on a body cam footage. You're going to go to jail and you'll probably serve an even longer sentence than you were. There's absolutely no good going to come from the time an officer is going to say you're under arrest to you resisting or trying to flee the scene. And fleeing the scene, what is that going to do? We live in a world today where the NSA spies on all kinds of shit. Your Fourth Amendment rights got tossed out the window quite a long time ago at this point, okay? And I'm not saying that's a good thing. It pisses me off. But they got tossed out the window. Where are you going to run to? Where are you going to run to? You're not a millionaire. You're not a billionaire. You can't go run to some island that you own. You can't escape the eyes of the law. What is your running going to accomplish? One more day that you live free? Sooner or later, they're going to find you. Guess what happens when they find you? They're going to do this again. You can't run forever. Sooner or later, it's either going to catch up to you, and you're either going to be killed because the cop's going to say, I feared for my life, or you're going to wind up going to jail anyway. You're not going to prolong this. That just makes no sense. So I am 100% for condemning a stupid cop. But I also don't want to put someone who did stupid things on a pedestal here either, okay? The cop absolutely has to be called into question in this case, because what she did was just stupid, okay? Either she intentionally lied and like, oh shit, I fucked up. This wasn't a taser. It's either intentional and in pretending to have made a mistake, or it was genuinely a really, really fucked up mistake made by someone who'd been on the force for many, many years. So she absolutely deserves a ton of criticism, even to be charged in this case, okay? But that being said, what keeps fueling all this outrage? Who are making people respond, in my opinion, in this way, where they're propping these guys like Daunte Wright, for example, up on this pedestal? Who is making them into martyrs, even though a lot of their actions were not something that should be honored? Like, again, if you want to make someone a martyr in this case, Second Lieutenant Nazario, he did nothing wrong other than not getting out of the cop car. And again, I think he even has quite an argument for that. Okay? So that being said, that's someone who is a cut and dry example of police harassment. Now, even if there was some police harassment mixed into this guy did have reasons to be going to jail. He had warrants out for his arrest. We could argue about the reason for the warrants, but they were there. And if they're there, then that's what the cop's going to be expected to do. That's part of their job. Okay? So when you resisted, you just took everything and made it worse. There was no warrant on Lieutenant Nazario. There was no real reason for him to be pulled over. And there was damn sure no reason for weapons to be drawn on him. Okay? So that's a huge, 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 huge problem. And that, to me, makes these situations night and day difference. Not only in the fact one lived and one died, but just in the fact one was completely innocent and the other was being pulled over, and then they found out he had problems to go to jail, and he tried to run. Like, the innocent guy isn't even the one that tried to run here. It's the guy with the criminal record, and yet which one, just because he was shot and killed, is the one that the mainstream media is really promoting as the martyr here? I say Lieutenant Nazario is more the martyr. That's my take. Okay? There was absolutely no reason for any of that to happen to him. Period. None. Absolutely none. But this guy resisted arrest. They didn't make him resist arrest. He chose to do it on his own. Actions come with consequences. If you want to play stupid games, you're going to win stupid prizes. Okay? That's just how it works in the real world. You can't do dumb shit and not expect to get bad consequences as a result of it. Okay? So that being said, the mainstream media, the way they cover this, the way they talk about this issue, it only encourages more and more and more and more people to get pissed and hit the streets and cause all this chaos. And who are they causing chaos to? Once again, just like the George Floyd situation last year, who are you harming? Are you harming the cops? Are you harming the people you think did commit murder here? No, you burn down more stores. Stores innocent people work at. So you're harming more innocent people because in your mind an innocent guy was killed. Not harming the killer, but more innocent people. That just doesn't make sense. That just does not make any sense. And not only, in my opinion, is the mainstream media making this way worse with the way they cover the shit, but let's switch gears for a minute. Go back to the George Floyd situation. Turns out what's taking place this week is the trial of Chauvin. Okay? Now the argument, the lawyers just finished up their closing arguments yesterday. Okay? They just finished up their arguments on Monday. Okay? And guess what Chauvin's attorney argued for on Monday? For the whole trial to be tossed out the window as a mistrial. Why? Because Maxine Waters goes to Minneapolis over the weekend and tells protesters to be more confrontational. Now, for the record, she says that Chauvin should be convicted of first-degree murder. And this is what I've been saying about Maxine Waters for quite some time. But this is an example of how politicians in the mainstream media are making society crumble apart. They are ripping this country apart, and they've got us by the balls at this point. Seriously. They're ripping our guts out as humanity and as Americans who can in some way, shape, or form have any kind of dialogue. They are destroying it. And that's a core part, in my opinion, of America. Are people being able to actually talk? Well, we hadn't been there in a while, and then we're only getting further away from being able to with this kind of bullshit. But first-degree murder. First-degree murder is a complete premeditated murder. That's not even on the table in the trial right now. So if she's telling everyone to get more confrontational, if this guy doesn't get convicted of first-degree murder, and first-degree murder isn't even on the table to be anything he is convicted of, then she's basically telling people, get out in the street and show your ass because you're not going to get what you want to out of this anyway. She's going to make people, especially those who only follow along what the movement wants like sheep and don't actually do any research for themselves, like I just explained. They heard her, oh, she says you should get first-degree murder. Let me see what the outcome is. He gets convicted of second-degree murder. Oh, it should have been first. Should have been first. Let's go hit the street. What the fuck? Do you even understand the difference between first-degree and second-degree murder? Probably not. Otherwise, you probably wouldn't be that pissed. Okay? But flat out, first-degree murder would basically imply that from the moment Chauvin got out of the vehicle, he said, I'm going to kill that motherfucker right there. That is the equivalent. That didn't happen. I don't believe that happened. I mean, if it was going to, why didn't you just get out and shoot him? Why did he go through all that if it was just a premeditated thing, right? So now you've got to look at the legal grounds of what could he actually be guilty of at this point. And the judge himself in the Chauvin trial has come out and said, now, you probably got a good chance of getting this thing overturned, because what are the odds that the jury hasn't heard that, considering how many times it's been circulating around on social media and how many times it's made it to mainstream media, especially Fox News. How many times has it been talked about? People are seeing this. Now, you know what that means? That means in a court system where you are supposed to prove the guilt, not the innocence. That's one other thing Chauvin's lawyer pointed out. Chauvin doesn't have to prove his innocence. In a court of law, you're supposed to be innocent until proven guilty. You have to be proved guilty beyond reasonable doubt in this case, right? And so the jury is supposed to be listening to the facts. But then they hear Maxine Waters, someone from California, come to Minnesota and tell everyone that if this doesn't happen, then you need to do this. Get out there, be more aggressive, be more confrontational, which, by the way, as I pointed out, Donald Trump was impeached for saying fight like hell, yet she's been saying confront Republicans, corner them off in public, shit like that, inciting arguably violence, and not a damn thing happens to her. That is hypocrisy, flat out. If Trump was impeached for the shit, her ass should have been gone a long time ago. But it wasn't, and now she's doing the shit again. So the judge himself is recognizing that could easily taint the jury to where they're going to convict out of a fear, because they probably live in that fucking town, and they're going to say, oh, if we don't convict this guy, the whole fucking town could burn down. So then they convict him rather than a case based off of the argument and the facts that were presented, but out of the fear of their own fucking lives and families, because you got a congresswoman out there, a United States elected official, who is then pushing people to make a decision because it's what she thinks should happen. The judge is already he would not dismiss the case, he would not declare a mistrial, but what he would do is say, you got a good chance to get this overturned in the Court of Appeals. So the judge has already recognized Maxine Waters' big fucking mouth, even if you think justice should be done here, could have ruined the whole fucking thing. And maybe he would get convicted of murder had she not said a damn word. Maybe he would have got convicted of exactly what you think he should be convicted of. But because of her big mouth, perhaps now the right attorney can appeal the decision and get it tossed out. Perhaps. And if that happens, how are you going to feel? How's Maxine Waters going to feel at that point? This is not helping one damn thing. It's not helping shit at this point. Okay? People like her are adding to our problems. Period. And once again, in the situation of Daunte Wright, we need to sit back and think critically. Don't accuse me of being pro-cop, because I'm going to come right out and absolutely attack the cop on her actions, and I'll attack 10 ways from Sunday fucking Sergeant Gutierrez's actions on Lieutenant Nazario. But I also am going to criticize both sides where there was shenanigans and bullshit. The cop was wrong in this case. Daunte Wright was being stupid in his case. Should it have warranted in his death? Absolutely not, because that's the part of the criminal justice. He should have gotten his day in court. But his actions alone opened the door for an escalation of problems, and because of a cop's either negligence, lack of training over a long fucking career, or just her premeditated murder, whatever, okay, his actions opened the door for her to have an excuse to do A, B, or C. If he hadn't have done those, she would have had no reason to draw any weapon to shoot him, tase him, mace him, nothing. If he had let the handcuffs go on, go in the car, go to jail, and go before the judge, Daunte Wright would probably be alive to this day. So his bad actions led to other bad actions and consequences, and now we have this shitstorm before us. So while it's absolutely important, in my opinion, that we criticize the cop and her poor choices and poor and bad actions, I think we need to recognize the other side too if we're going to have any kind of decent conversation about the real problem. I will say there needs to be massive police reform. I'm also not going to pretend someone didn't do something stupid when they did just because it fits the argument against the cop. If we're going to have this conversation, then we've got to be intellectually honest about what the hell we're talking about. And if we're not going to be, then how are we any different from the people who are tearing the country apart right now? How are we any different from the politicians who say bullshit when it fits their message to try to brainwash other people? If you're not going to be intellectually honest and criticize both sides when there's a problem there, or praise both sides when there's good things there, then you're only wanting to cherry pick things that fit your particular argument, and you're not being intellectually honest, and you're not going to help any of us in the country ever come together for any form of unity and understand how we've got to fix our problems. You're only wanting to argue things based off how you personally feel, even when and if you disagree with what took place, or your typical argument you've been making doesn't line up with the facts here, you want to cherry pick those facts. If that's how you want to cover this and that's how you want to talk about anything, then you're not doing anything for the good of the community. You're not doing anything for the good of the American people. You're not doing anything to empower more people, educate more people, or talk about this and how we can learn something from it. You're only trying to bullshit for views, or bullshit because it's the politically correct thing to do, or whatever. That's what the end game is if you don't want to be intellectually honest. You're either doing it for some reason because you're afraid of the backlash, you're afraid someone's not going to like you and there's going to be big backlash off of it. You're simply just cherry picking facts to fit your argument because you don't like a cop, or you just love to stir shit. I don't really know. But we got to be honest about these sorts of things. We got to criticize both sides, because if you're willing to do that, then guess what? You're at least going to probably get some of the people who were more leaning toward the pro-cop side to say, okay, fair enough. You recognize this, and I'll recognize some of the problems on the side that I'm defending over here too. So maybe we can have that conversation. We've got to learn to get to that point, flat out, if we ever want to be able to talk as a society again, in my opinion.